G'day, Geoff Lewis here from Seriously Series, and welcome to the first episode, and probably a couple of episodes I'll do, courtesy of Sean, one of our supporters on Patreon. And a big thank you to our supporters on Patreon and our other key supporters too via PayPal. It's greatly appreciated, and these contributions have allowed for this video and other videos obviously to be produced. So we're going to call this trip prep, and Sean sent me a lovely message saying, Geoff, would you mind showing us what you take when you go camping? Just wait for the breeze to go by. So yes, what equipment do you take when you go camping? What kind of tools do you take and spare parts for the Series 2? What do you take there? What kind of food do you take? What kind of food do you eat when you're out in the bush? So what have I done? I've gone bush. So I'm out here filming an episode in the Golden Quest series. I'm out here in the great western woodlands of Western Australia, and I'm on a 4-day trip. So I'm just going to take you around the camp, a bit of a makeshift camp that I knocked up last night. Pitch black, naturally, and I'll just show you some of the equipment that I've got, some of the tips and tricks. And look, if you're watching this video and you think you've got something well worth sharing, then don't keep it to yourself. Put a comment down below and share it with the community on the World Wide Web. And more importantly, if this sounds like a video of interest to you, you know what to do. Stay tuned. Rightio, so I guess the first thing we need to think about before we go on any camping trip, and I don't mean to teach people how to suck eggs here, but you have to think about preparation. And poor preparation leads to poor performance, and I think that's very, very true. You've probably seen it on a couple of my cooking videos where I've forgotten utensils and ingredients, but pulled through with a thing called initiative, which can be incredibly dangerous. But preparation is actually very, very important. And the other thing that people forget about is research. Research is absolutely vital. And I'm a big one for research, as many of you know. And I think if you research your trip well, it can actually make it a much more enjoyable trip or adventure, you could say. So for example, for this series of, this episode in the Golden Quest series, I've read a couple of books, a couple of scientific reports on this sort of area in regards to the geology, the geography, the human habitation of the area, and the flora and the fauna. And I've been down this part of the world before, but that's something that I've sort of looked into a little bit more, this area. By doing that, I think you have a greater appreciation for the environment that you're travelling through. And one of the most important things is you can actually help the environment to work for you. So, like the shelter I'm sitting under here, this is nothing more than a canvas tarpaulin rigged up between two trees, and then some makeshift guide ropes. Prime example there. The other thing that you need to look at, and I won't go on about this too much longer, is the time of year that you're going to be travelling in. What are the temperatures going to be? Are they going to be minus whatever, or are they going to be 100 degrees, 130, 150 degrees Fahrenheit, or are they going to be 40, 50 degrees Celsius? Why is that of importance? Well, that's going to reflect what kind of food you're going to take, probably. And it's also going to reflect on how much water you're going to take too. Water weighs a lot. 1 litre of water is same as, what is it? Yeah, 1 litre of water equals to 1 kilo. So if you've got to take a couple extra jerrys of water, then that's going to affect your power to weight ratio in your vehicle because you're carrying more. And a big thing out here in Western Australia, and Australia in general, particularly in the outback, is fuel. Fuel is absolutely critical. The reason being is it is a long drive in between fuel stops, and this is something that I am constantly mindful of. And the first thing I do is I always look on a map. I've got a big map in my study, and I will look at that and I will see roughly the distance, and then I'll calculate exactly how many kilometers. Then I'll calculate that into miles if I'm taking the Series 2, and then from that I can calculate how much fuel I need to carry on board, you know, how many jerry cans. So that's probably one of the first things, you know, you should really look at doing. The other thing is too, permits are very important depending on where you're traveling, and obviously, can you have a fire is another thing too. Is it the right time of year? Are you going in a conservation area or a national park? Doesn't sound like much, but there is a big difference legislation wise between a conservation area and a national park, so that's something well worth reading up on. So, you know, do your research and give yourself plenty of time to prepare, because if you have plenty of time to prepare, then you have less chance of forgetting stuff, which I do all the time, but that's half the joys of it, because you end up finding interesting means of getting yourself out of trouble. But anyway, enough of that, and let's go on a bit of a tour around the camp, eh? So as you can see, the back of the Series 2, it's well, it's a bit dusty, obviously. Laptop. But it's not a very big area, so you have to be careful with what you actually pack. And I've always tried to adopt this with really any vehicle I've had, because obviously, as I said before, the less weight you carry, the better power to weight ratio that you'll have, and you know, the better performance that you'll have out of your vehicle off-road. Sorry, the flies are a bit friendly here today. And that's the other thing too, when you load up your vehicle, go for a little drive around the block first and just see how it feels, because it will behave and perform completely differently to how you would normally have the vehicle. Because let's be honest, 90% of the time your vehicle isn't actually carrying a load. So thinking about what you're taking with you is really important, and it's something that you don't get right. You have to keep refining it all the time. And you know, the stuff I used to take back in Tasmania is very different to what I take over here. So anyway, I'll show you the camp setup and just show you what you can actually achieve out of a camp with a very small payload and a very small area to actually store your kit in. So as I said, the flies are a bit friendly out here today, but the top tip if you're travelling to Australia, or well, once the restrictions are lifted obviously, but if you are living here and you're travelling to Outback Australia for a trip of some kind, get yourself some of this. It's called Nature's Botanical, natural rosemary and some other wood oils in a cream. It's great. They used to use it on horses to keep the flies off their wounds, because obviously they go a bit funny with all the flies hanging around. So you just put a little bit on your cheeks, like so, and the flies will land, but they'll take off straight away. And it's all natural too, so it's really good stuff. Well worth getting it. Anyway, enough of that. So this is, I guess you could call Camp Geoff behind me here. And simple, basic, but effective really. The canvas tarpaulin I've showed in another video how I sort of set that up, and it's fantastic. Really, the time that it takes, and obviously it's not set up as good as it could be because I did it in the, I guess, pitch black darkness of night last night when I rolled into camp, and I put it up because there was a massive thunderstorm coming through the camp too. But it does the job. It's I think it's a 6 metre, yeah, 6 metre by 3 metre tarpaulin. I may have that wrong, but I've got it inside out obviously at the moment, so it needs to be the other way around. But the overall weight of it's probably about 5 to 7 kilos, which sounds like a lot, but really it isn't for the amount of shade and shelter that it actually gives you. It's really, really good. I've got a couple of retractable poles that I use, and then I've just tied it down on the other side, and it works fantastic. So the reason why I've gone down this road, particularly with the Series 2, is if you went down the road of getting a gazebo kind of setup, like I know Australian does one, these are very long and incredibly bulky. The great thing about this is I can just fold it a particular way and sort of fit it into the back amongst all the other gear and equipment. So absolutely fantastic, and just so versatile. Like, I can take it off here and I can put it under the Series 2 and use it as a drop sheet if I'm working on the vehicle. Obviously I'm not going to do that today, but you can use it for that. You know, back in the, I think, 1930s, 1920s even, and even on D-Day, you know, they used canvas as virtually like a sand track or a sand mat to distribute the weight of vehicles, so you can use it for that. You probably destroy it in the process, but if you get out of trouble and you live to tell a tale or two, then that's probably a good outcome. So yeah, so that's sort of the setup that I've got. It's great, keeps the rain off you, but more importantly out here in Western Australia, it's the sun. The sun is a real killer out here. It can destroy pretty much anything. It fades, it perishes, it's just brutal, and it's very brutal on yourself, so you need some form of shade. The rope that I use is just generic hemp rope. It's affordable, it's cheap, it doesn't stretch, and then I've just got some nylon cord that I use as my guide ropes, which work really well. It's non-stretch too. The swag is just an ARB touring swag, or as some of you have commented on our reviews and videos of the ARB swag, it's a one-man tent, and whatever you think of it, I don't really mind. It's a fantastic swag, or one-man tent we'll say, and it's my home away from home. I've spent, I think, 6 or 7 months in one, working in remote areas of WA, and it's fantastic. It's got a bookshelf inside, nice comfy mattress. It's reasonably, it's not too bulky compared to some other swags out there on the market today, and it's easy to set up and no pegs, so it's great. But anyway, I'll take you in underneath the shelter and show you what's going on there, and I'll show you a few little tips and tricks in regards to sort of food and sort of utensils, and you know, obviously the stuff that I take with me, and that's worked very well for me for a number of years. Rightio, so Field HQ you could say. So obviously this is the canvas shelter. Series 2's over there, that's the field workshop, which I'll do some repairs on shortly. But big enough space, definitely for myself. Obviously, yep, swag there, camp table here. The camp table I have is nothing flash, it's a cheap and nasty little table. Well, it hasn't been that nasty, it's lasted me 10 years. I think I paid $11 for it, 10 years ago. Camp oven billy is pretty much all I need to cook with. As you've seen with cooking videos on this channel, they're obviously quite unique to the hospitality industry, because sometimes I forget ingredients and all the rest, but we get there in the end. But basically I can cook anything I need in the camp oven. I've literally just done a damper now, and I'm going to do a steak and onion pie this evening with homemade short crust pastry. And if you want to find out how to do that, you need to subscribe to this channel. But really simple. I haven't got a fridge on this trip because it takes up too much room in the Series 2. So I've just got a small, I think 15 litre or 10 litre icebox or esky, and it's a June 4x4 one that I bought at the same time when I got this table. So supposedly it's meant to keep your ice for I think a week, but it doesn't. You're lucky if you get 3 days out of it, depending on what the weather conditions are like. So I generally like to use dry ice, or I guess solidified or solid CO2. Sounds a bit odd, but it works really, really effectively, because I think it's at probably minus 200 degrees centigrade. So you put a kilo or two of that into your icebox or esky, and you'll get a week easy. And the good thing about it too is you can freeze stuff. You could actually freeze meat, and you can also have ice cream and icy poles, but sadly haven't got it on this trip. Obviously chopping board, which doubles as a jacking plate for the vehicle, and obviously we've got the pantry down here, and filming equipment over at the other end. That's pretty much it. Very simple, but with a few luxuries like a good solid camp chair. But anyway, I'll take you up the other end and I'll show you sort of the food situation, and we'll probably leave it there. So, real simple setup. The great thing is I've got 2 plastic boxes here. This one here is for utensils. Just move the damper. Nice mixing bowl's always good for your bread and your damper and whatnot. You can also use it as a washing up basin of some kind. So utensils in here, basically a fry pan, couple of plates, billy, grater if I'm getting really fancy, tin foil, and obviously some garbage bags, paper towel, masher and peeler. And that's pretty much it. And then this one here, get you in frame, is a wolf pack, courtesy of the Expedition Centre. These are fantastic. A lot of people hate them, but I don't. I like them. Bang for your buck, they're fantastic value, and they fit in the back of the Series 2 really, really, really nicely. One of the great things about them too is you can actually stack them on top of one another, which is great. So if I'm doing a longer trip, particularly in the Series 3, I'll take an extra one with spare parts and stuff like injector cleaner and lead additive and stuff like that. But this one here I used to use for my tools, and now I just use this for my food. So a bit of muesli, always good, got to keep the fibre up. An array of tea bags. I'm not really a coffee drinker, makes me go a bit too crazy. Pasta is a great one to have. I'm just talking on pasta. One of the things I really try and do is bring things along with me that really don't need to be refrigerated. Ideally, all I want is my meat to be refrigerated if I'm bringing meat, or some kind of dairy product. So pasta is a fantastic one. Pasta stir through, can't go wrong with that. So if Geoff's feeling a bit lazy, it's that and pasta, which doesn't happen too often, thank God. Salt, and then basically, I know it's probably going against what I've said, but most of the stuff I have in here is actually tinned, which I know weighs a lot more than dehydrated food, but it's a lot cheaper and it's very easy to get out here in, I guess, Outback WA, around Kalgoorlie. It's quite difficult to get dehydrated meals. You can get them, but they're expensive, and I can do a lot more with what I've got here. Curry powder, I can do a nice jumbuck stew with that. baked beans on damper or toast, easy, another meal done. You know, tomato puree, I can use that for a jumbuck or a nice spaghetti bolognese sauce, which I can then use for a few days. Good old bully beef or corned beef, you know, good prospecting food. It's good enough for the old timers, it's good enough for me. And obviously tinned stew, just a nice easy one too, and a few, you know, pasta packs always make it easy. And look, if it's really got that bad and the zombies are rising and everything's gone to absolute you know what, don't worry. If you got Deb, you'll be all good. Because Deb's the one constant in this universe. You could leave it out here for 100 years and the packet would still look the same and the content wouldn't have changed either. And on another note, if your radiator, well, probably, yeah, if you got a split in your radiator or a leak, put a bit of Deb in. It probably actually worked quite well. Anyway, so that's pretty much what's in here, and for some reason my wife Claire's put a fuel filter out of a 4BD1 in here, so I don't know how that got in there. Anyway, and always a few tins of mackerel or sardines. It stinks, but once you've been out here a few days you tend to stink too, so it doesn't really matter, does it? And I actually quite enjoy them. So that's pretty much it. It doesn't look like much, but out of this and the other stuff that I'll show you that I've got out here, I could quite easily live out here for probably two or 3 weeks. Not really at a stretch, because you know, if you're looking at just one meal out of that, then it's not very efficient. It's the other ingredients that you bring with you that makes all the difference, and I'll show you that now. Rightio. So, not to get all doomy and gloomy and boo-hooey and all the rest, but one of the things I always think about when I come out, you know, on a trip like this, and I'm pretty much, I'd say 200 kilometers, or what's that, probably a bit over 100 miles from the nearest town or settlement. Very nice. Just a bit of ginger beer there, non-alcoholic of course. Yeah, so, you know, a fair distance from any known habitation, and you've got to think about it a bit, because it's not necessarily because you're driving a more mature vehicle, but you do have to dance with the idea or toy with the idea of what happens if something bad went wrong. And I always think about it with something that could go wrong with the vehicle that I wouldn't be able to fix myself. And you know, it could be an electrical component fails, it could be the main shaft in the gearbox snaps, it could be an axle that snaps, which we all know is a very common thing to happen on the Series 2 and the Series 3 and Series 1 Land Rovers. So, you know, you got to think about it a bit. So one thing I always do, as you saw, you know, in the wolf pack, is I always bring plenty of food. And the other thing that I take, and what I was getting to, is I have one of these, and this is a Hessian sack, and this is fantastic. I actually picked this up at a pet shop. A mate of mine was going in there to get some stuff for something I can't remember, and they had these as dog beds. I was like, no, that's a Hessian sack. So I bought 2 of them. So I've got one that I keep my hemp rope in for the capstan winch, and the other one I keep my veggies in there. Now the reason why the Hessian sack works really well, and it's what I'm telling you here today, it's nothing new, it's been around for donkey's years, is the fact that you've got a relatively coarse weave, so air can move through it. And if you keep the Hessian sack relatively damp or slightly wet, it evaporates, no different to a water bag. And so therefore, it actually helps to keep the veggies cool. but it allows them to breathe. Now, if you pick up, for example, a sack of what we got in here, potatoes from a supermarket nowadays, majority of which are actually in plastic. So what happens? You get condensation builds up and your spuds will actually ripen a lot quicker than they should. So it's even just a handy one to have at home, and that's what I use it for at home. The other thing is too, is obviously corn is a good one, which I've talked about in previous videos. Sweet potatoes, Swedes, any kind of root vegetable is going to last a lot longer out here and doesn't need refrigeration. So, you know, that really cuts down on your weight. The key thing is though, is to keep it in an area which it isn't getting direct sunlight all the time, or isn't getting too hot. So I hang this up in a tree in the shade, and that means the wind can slowly, or the breeze can blow through and help to cool it down. And the other thing is, you don't want to have it on the ground because there's ants everywhere here, and I did see a snake on the track yesterday, and I hate snakes. I'm an absolute coward when it comes to them, and I'm happy to admit it. But all jokes aside, taking spuds and root vegetables like that is fantastic because they will keep for weeks and weeks. So if you're out somewhere and your EPIRB fails, your HF radio fails, and you're so unlucky that your satellite phone fails too, and whatever else you have, you know, you really need to be able to set yourself up. So spuds last for ages, they're relatively lightweight. And the other thing I always take, and I'm plugging it again, I know, is a good sack or bag of Wallabies baking flour. And the reason why I take this is it's light, it's cheap, it doesn't go off. Now, the other thing is to think of how many, I guess, cuisines or food that we eat on a day-by-day basis that flour is actually in. Think about it. It's staggering. Cakes, muffins, scones, bread. Bread's obviously an obvious one, but pasta even. So if I've got this and I've got a bit of butter and a couple of eggs, I can make my own pasta. I can make my own ravioli and put a bit of tinned corned beef in it. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? Not at all. If I've got butter and flour, I can make my own pastry. And you know, if I have to go shake a tree and get a drop bear and cut his leg off to put in it to survive, then well, you will, won't you? And have drop bear pie. But you know, it's stuff like this that's very simple, and it just lasts, and it's not expensive. You know, you don't have to go out and buy a dehydrator. You really don't. And I guess my inspiration for sort of this and this camp setup is I do read a lot, and I do look at a lot of the early pioneers and early explorers, and some of them obviously took way too much kit, but the ones that didn't, they really just took versatile pieces of kit that actually had multiple uses. Once again, like the canvas tarpaulin here. They did take, you know, odd little bits of luxury like this chair, and obviously a nice swag, but they didn't over embellish on it. You know, they didn't take a 120 litre fridge with them to keep their water cool, you know, or soda streams and, you know, plasma TVs and Xboxes this and PlayStation that and all the rest. They just took the bare minimum what they needed, you know, and realised that, you know, food, shelter and water are the, you know, three most critical things. So anyway, this is a basic camp of what I use out of the Series 2. It's very different to what I take with the Series 3 and the Parenti, because those vehicles obviously built for different applications. So I'll show you that in the future if you find this of interest. And so if you have been enjoying the content here at Seriously Series, then please do consider supporting us via Patreon. And look, if Patreon isn't your cup of tea, you can support us via our website by clicking on the link in the content section down below for seriouslyseries.com.au, and you can support us there via PayPal. All proceeds go to producing these videos and much more. And if you're new to the channel, then be sure to click on that subscribe button too. Click on the notification button also, and that way you won't miss out on one single video. But anyway, hope to see you in our next video.